If you're an experienced rider, a hill like this, you're gonna fly right over it. If you're a less experienced rider, a hill like this might make you want to turn around. Let's take a closer look at this hill. I'm going to show you some techniques to help build confidence and make you feel more comfortable when you're riding this big, huge motorcycle up and down these things. Okay, so this is where I start assessing the hill. This is where I've got the best vision. I have a good track. I can see there's quite a few lines on the inside track and up the middle. This is the point in time where I want to gauge my commitment level, whether I'm just going to go or I'm going to stop, take a walk and go look at what I see. On this trail, it's slightly rutted. You've got small loose rock, large loose rock, embedded rock, and the crest at the top of the hill you can't see over. My vision changes now. I'm going to take that inside left line or I'm going to take the center line, but as soon as I see the loose and embedded rocks, my goal is to have my front tire hit at least amount of those as possible. The other goal is to see where my rear tire is going to get the best traction. So this is a pretty steep hill. It's got a lot of rocks in it, loose and embedded. It's going to make me think, especially when it comes to momentum control. When I go to climb a hill like this in first gear, why I don't choose first gear all the time is because the throttle is much harder to manage. In other words, if I've got the RPMs up to keep my momentum going, one, any input I give to the throttle, either letting it off a little bit or giving it a little bit more, is going to be a pretty abrupt impact. So it's going to change the bike, it's going to throw my body position around, it might put me in a spot I don't want. So I'm going to choose second gear, or at least the experience in second gear is better. Now, obviously that depends on grade and that depends on traction and it depends on your comfort level and your experience level. But I choose to ride up hills in second a lot of times because it's a lot easier for throttle management. So now any input that I give to the throttle is a lot less impact. I can bounce around off these rocks and the drive is not spinning so much. So maybe I don't get thrown off as much as I would if I were in first gear. If my front wheel goes in a place I don't want it to, I can slow down a little bit in second gear with the RPMs lower and still lug this engine, maybe even slipping the clutch just a bit if I need a little more power. But this can happen at any time climbing a hill. You can get kicked into something you don't want to be, or the line that you're trying to avoid. In this hill, it would be this line here. It's steep, it's rutted, and it's got a lot of loose rock. So when you get kicked into something like this, be ready for impact. Don't psych yourself out. Relax as much as you can. Be a little looser with your grip on the bars. Also be a little looser because now you've really got to control the clutch maybe, but definitely the throttle much more delicately, especially if you decide to or the trail forces you to shift into first gear. When you're on an oversized heavy adventure bike, when that bike's revving higher and all the things are tighter on the motorcycle, any impact can throw us off the trail, can throw us off the line. Manage first gear nice and smooth and be ready for impact. So climbing a hill like this, control your momentum so that you could crest the hill, but be ready to stop. If something happens on the other side, there's a vehicle, the hill gets really steep, the trail doesn't continue, cover your clutch, cover your brake, carry enough momentum, start to scrub off some speed as you get up over the top of that hill to stop if you need to. So body position climbing a hill, we want more weight forward. We don't want a whole lot of weight back. But what we don't want to do is prairie dog. We don't want to be way over the top of this. There's no control to any of that. You kind of want to be true to the hill. As much as you can, that's the body position you want to be in. It's going to be a little more forward than it is back. Now, is there a situation where you might want to shift your weight back? A couple of times that might happen. You might get kicked off a rock, or obviously on this one, you got embedded in loose rocks. You might get a little weight back. That's okay. Just play with it. Intentionally, where you might want your weight back climbing a hill is you need some more traction on the rear wheel. So just a slight shift of weight back, just to feel that traction, maybe even bounce on the pegs just a little bit, just to get some weight on that rear wheel to give you enough traction to keep moving forward. The other thing I think about when I'm climbing a hill with embedded and loose rocks, or I get to a flat spot like this, is steering the motorcycle or obstacle avoidance. One of the best ways I like to do that is with peg weighting or peg influence, pushing on the pegs. I'm also steering with the handlebars, but in a different way of turning the bike. I'm more directing it. So I'm using peg weight or peg weighting or my body weight on peg pressure. What we're talking about here is a quick movement. It's just changing the direction of that front wheel to avoid an obstacle. What I'm referring to here is the turn initiation, the piece before we ever even think about shifting any weight to counteract what the traction is doing to the wheels and the weight of the motorcycle. If I want to avoid some of these rocks, I push on the peg in the direction I want to go. So if I want to go to the left just real quick, maybe I give it a little throttle, or maybe I just push on that left foot peg. I want to go to the right, I push on that right foot peg. I may add a little throttle, I may decrease a little throttle. Momentum is going to depend on what you're trying to avoid. The idea is try and do this smooth, try and stay relaxed on the bars, and really give that foot peg some pressure to get this big, heavy motorcycle to move. Most of the time when I ride on the arches of my feet. On a hill like this, I might move to the balls of my feet. It's going to give me more control. I'm going to be able to avoid obstacles much better and maneuver the bike much better. I can also feel the ground underneath me and how that's impacting the motorcycle much better when I'm on the balls of my feet. So now we're going to go down this hill. Now what's interesting is most of us would rather go uphill, but downhill causes anxiety because of momentum control, because of stuff like loose rocks and embedded rocks and crests and gravity. Gravity is completely working against us here. Now, we know the front brake is the best brake to use downhill. However, in some situations, it doesn't feel as safe or comfortable to use the front brake. Now, we know we have the rear brake, but in a situation like this where you have loose rock, embedded rock, and hard packed ground, if you hit that rear brake a little too hard, you can lock the rear wheel. For a second or two, that's okay. But if you hold it there to help you control your momentum, you're going to have to start managing a slide. The smoothest way down a hill, maybe the safest and certainly the most comfortable, is engine braking. If you can find a smooth path and that engine speed is comfortable for you, that's the best way to go down a hill. Don't touch any of your brakes. Find your best line, stay away from the loose rocks, find the hard pack stuff, and get down that hill as safely and comfortably as possible. You want some momentum going downhill for sure. The slower you go, the more you're going to feel the loose rocks, the more you're going to feel the embedded rocks, the more the front is going to be redirected and take you off your line. So when the pitch gets steeper and the rocks get looser and I have more anxiety about using the front brake to control my momentum and slow the bike down even more, I turn the engine off. When the motorcycle's on and running and I'm in gear using engine brake, the RPMs are going to stop at a certain point. Let's just say I'm in first gear and they stop at 1300 RPMs. What's not going to stop is my speed. I'm going to gain speed, and depending on how long the hill is or how steep it is, I could be going way faster than I want to. With the engine off, if I let the clutch all the way out, it's going to lock the rear wheel up. But if I barely pull the clutch in, it'll let the rear wheel move. So I'm basically working in the friction zone of the clutch with the motorcycle off in gear to control that rear wheel very precisely. With the engine off and the transmission in gear, we have the full braking power of the motor in the clutch. Control your speed going down a hill. You don't want so much speed that you can't stop or avoid obstacles. You also need to have enough momentum so you can get over loose rocks. Body position going downhill, you want your weight back to the extreme. What you don't want to do is being in a crouched position, because now you don't have as much power with your legs, and at a certain point you get too far down and you're just sitting. Don't want to sit. What you want to do is slide your legs along the seat area and push your weight back over the passenger seat. So it's a slide and hover. Don't let your knees get too bent so that you're in a seated position. And you don't always need this extreme weight shift, but the good thing about being here is now you've settled the rear, you've got a lot of weight back here. What else this does when you lock your knees against the seat is it takes the pressure off the bars. That helps you give delicate input to the controls, the clutch, brake, and throttle. It also helps with deflections when you get embedded or loose rocks hitting that front wheel. On a downhill like this, I'm going to ride on the arches of my feet so I can still reach the controls. For less experienced riders, this hill may seem daunting at first, but if you use the techniques that I taught you in this video, you're going to expand the terrain that you're able to ride.